Hey gang, welcome back. In this episode, I think I'm beginning my descent into madness. I got this really weird idea in my head. I knew I wanted to do a tank next, and then I was thinking I wanted to do something colorful, and then I got this weird idea of like, what if I took a Plagueburst Crawler and I painted it like it was made out of steak? So what you get as a result is the meat wagon. This will be part one of this escapade, and it'll get me about to where you can see in that picture. So welcome aboard. This is 0 to 40K. As much as I'm a pretty laid back person, I was actually very nervous when I got this started. Like, look at that brush, totally jacked up. Very first stroke, going over some spot I shouldn't be going over with this, where it's going to be metallic later. The whole time I'm thinking, oh, like, did I just burn $70? And then I just sort of made peace with it. Like, this is going to be a long haul. Took a deep breath and settled myself after an initial mistake and got down to business. So the paint's going on pretty thick here, and I definitely recognize that. And you may be wondering why I went with like black for a base, but there's so many deep crevices in this thing that I know I'm not necessarily going to get to. That I want to make sure that they're very much black. So a lot of inside depth between wheels, down the barrel of the mortar on top. Just a lot of spots that I want to make sure are shaded in black in case I don't get to them. So it's a little bit of extra work, and I'm laying it on a bit thick here. Eventually smooth it out a little, but this being the very first coat, it's actually going to soak in, and I know I'm going over this with some strong colors in a very soon future step. This is one of those moments where you look at it while you're working and you're like, oh, geez. But it does turn out okay. It's also very clear at this point that I need to get a little bit better with modeling. These were much larger parts than I'm used to, and you can see, across here, there's a few spots where my glue joint is just not good. Like, it's got a gap in there. You'll see over the course of this that does get filled in a bit with paint, but I definitely missed the mark a little bit. I still got to get a lot better at my actual model construction. I improved a bit in terms of getting some of the ridge lines shaved down and a lot of where the sprue connections are clipped. I did better there, but I think I need like some elastics or some vice grips to make sure that big parts actually hold together well. Someday I want to do a big knight model, and that's going to have a lot of stuff like this too. So it's something to work on. So here you can see that the coat I just did, it's a little bit smoother looking. I think it's going to work out. I'm moving on to Bugman's Glow, which, if I'm remembering lore correctly, Bugman from Blood Bowl was like a beer sponsor, so maybe it's like Blush Cheeks or something like that. It's not super red. I don't want to go into like Ronald McDonald territory or anything like that, but we're starting to move into sort of a muscly sort of color range, and it feels good to paint like this. Most of what I've done so far has been grimy green ceramic armor, some tans, some stuff like that. Most of it has been really in a very tight color range, so this is pretty cool to get rolling. This is the first time that I've actually not built the entire model from start and then tried to paint it whole. And I think next time I do a Plagueburst Crawler, I'll probably do it in even more chunks and paint them and then put them together. But this is basically the faceplate, the dozer plate on the front of it, and it's just a really cool piece. It kind of brings the whole tank together. So I've got the same steps to do here, which obviously I'm not going to linger on too much, but it's interesting and smart, apparently. I also left the guns off of this, the side guns, sponsons. Are they sponsored guns? I don't know. No, I think sponsons are the circular things that go left and right. Different point. Anyway, there's guns that go on the side. I'm going to paint them separately also. But I think in the future I'm going to do... I've watched a couple videos where people take the heads of their Marines and don't attach them until they're painted. That's SMRT smart, so I think I'm going to start doing that. Here we're sort of getting into the meat of this teehee. This is where I'm going to start painting the marbling of fat. And for this, I actually just went back to Rakarth flesh again. So basically Rakarth, then Bugman's, then Rakarth again. I'm just trying to make sort of organic looking just graininess throughout this. And I'm going to start with some bigger chunks that are like the larger marbling veins, and then the next step after that will be like some little ones that sort of little tributaries that come off. This is a lot of fun just painting like this because you're not following a fixed pattern. Especially the bottom of this tank is like a big wide open space to work with. I also used the bottom of the tank as a practice space. Because it had all of this flat area, I could sort of give this a shot without risking the top side of the tank that everyone's going to see all the time. It turned out that I didn't have to make too many adjustments, but I think starting with the bottom was a good call. It allowed me to try a few things out and see what fit, and then continue on with the visible parts of the tank, the more visible parts later. For the most part on the bottom, I'm just kind of doodling and getting a feel for how I want this to work. The bottom side of this is a great test bed. It's a huge flat surface. For the most part, when this thing is sitting on a table, unless I flip it over in a fit of rage, no one's really going to see the bottom, but it allows me to, with exactly these paints, test out some patterns. I think I color tested on my palette instead of this, but the main thing is I can build up some confidence in the pattern on the bottom first, and I think I will do that again in the future. Things get a lot cooler now that we're on the top side of the tank. It's not just a big flat plate. I've had a little time to practice. Now you get this really sort of interesting dynamic between these organic shapes and the actual faces of the tank, because this tank is very atypical. It's got some gothic stuff going on with the sort of ridging on the sides that cover the treads, and then the faces are a weird combination of like angles, but then also a bunch of roundness to it. And this is the moment where I take a look at it and I go, I don't know if this is a good idea, but it's not the worst idea. I can start to see it come together. Yeah, this front plate right here. I'm like, yep, this might be cool. Yeah, that music was killing me. But anyhow, as we move forward, now we're filling in those larger sections that were created by doing the large fat marbling with tinier bits. And as you can see, it starts to come together to almost look like a sort of camouflage. I mean, you'd have to be hiding in front of a wall of steak, maybe some sunset on a savanna, but it's starting to look tanky. We're adding some, I thought it was going to be Carroburg Crimson, but it's actually Berserker Bloodshade. And this, we're just going to wash all of the sections that we've sort of steak painted. I'm not going to let it pull up as much as you can see here. I sort of scooch in, get some pools going, and then move stuff around. But what it's going to do is it's going to darken everything up. It's going to give us a little bit of texture. It's going to darken up the fat a bit much, so I'm probably going to end up doing another step later to make sure that the fat pops out again. but it overall sort of reddens the steak, gets it a little bit closer to a steak color, and makes some of the sections you can see like around those bolts where the shade wash is like pulling up, you get this like tiny little sense of blood out of it, which is great, and we're going to emphasize that in the next step a lot. So the model has all these pock marks in it, these like tiny little holes. Some of them are full of like glop, but a lot of them are just these like empty little holes. And what I'm going to do here is use blood for the blood god, which is some pretty thick technical stuff. The sense I get by using it, though I haven't used it this way myself, is that you'd run it along the edge of a blade or at the end of like some demon's horns or whatever, and it legit looks like blood. It's really interesting painting with it because your eye naturally sort of associates this exact color with like, oop, I got a paper cut or something. But what I'm doing here is I'm just glopping some into these holes, and then I'll pull just a little bit out so it's kind of like oozing. And the effect that I'm going for here is like when you go to the grocery store and you buy a steak, if it's got one of those stickers on it that says, hey, this thing needs to go in the next day or two, maybe it's $1 or $2 off, there's always like some amount of, not blood per se, I mean it is blood, but it's like kind of thinned out, it's like pooled in the bottom of the thing. So it's not really a mark of freshness, but all of these little pock marks across the model are going to get this, and at a much later step when I really start grinding things up, I'll probably throw some disgusting green out of them as well, so it definitely looks like it's turnt. On to one of my favorite steps, that being metallics. This is, look over my notes, this is Lead Belcher. I'm using my trusty starter brush from Citadel. The thing's just a workhorse. So anyhow, things that we're going to use a small variety of metallics on this model. Everything from gun barrels to a lot of the gears, definitely tons of wheels and the machinery on the sides underneath are going to get this. And then I'm going to go for something a little brassier on some of the more decorative parts, like the crank wheels on the sides of the mortar. So if you can see those rows of spikes on both sides, the spikes themselves will get Lead Belcher, but I'll go with something more brassy there. The front gun will get brass around some of the rings. Obviously I'm talking about a totally different step, but this part's just fun. It's going to be super shiny after this first coat, but I'll eventually hit it with something to grime it up to knock down the shininess later. One of the coolest and most challenging parts of this model is the sides here. The wheels themselves obviously are simple, but as you look in there, there's just a lot of machinery and cool stuff, especially behind those chains that are hanging. So you really got to get in there, hold the model, and so you can see me spinning it all over the place right now. Hold it at several angles, relative to your light source. You can sort of see in there, and every once in a while, I'll just glom on some Lead Belcher and get in there and, by its reflection, see that I'm hitting something that I should be painting, which is pretty interesting. Just a brief note on these spikes that run along both sides of the tank. They're flipping sharp. The number of times that I was spinning this model around in my hand, I was like, ow! Ugh! Thankfully, you're not painting at exactly the same moment that you're spinning the model, but these spikes are actually like amazingly sharp, pretty darn dangerous. I guarantee you several people out there have absolutely put one of these spikes through their hand. I just figured I'd note that because, like, you can see here that they look pretty sharp. In real life, very sharp. These jagged blades on the front blade of the dozer blade of the model is really, really cool. This whole front plate really just like brings the entire model together. It's so Death Guard-y. It's like, hey, we have a mortar tank. Oh, by the way, it's got a bulldozer blade on the front. Just get over all the stuff that we've sickened to death. These are really rad. They got a sort of Batman vibe to them, but definitely fun to paint. So just when you're getting comfortable with something, I'm moving on to metallics, and look at that. I tried, you can see around the mortar, I used Warplock Bronze, and that felt good, and then I was like, oh, I want something a little lighter for the side trim, so I think I moved on to like Retributor armor, and oh my god, was it like not the color it looked like in the pot. It's too bright. It belongs on some very loyal space marine somewhere. I looked down and I was like, oh my god, I've gotten so far. Did I just jack this thing up? So I get my composure. No retreat. No surrender. Hopefully I can fix this. The paint's still wet. Very quickly, as you see, grab a Q-tip, dab it in some water. Breathe. Breathe. Most of it ends up coming off. Enough where I'm going to go back over it in Warplock Bronze. The main thing is, like, just don't over freak out in the moment. Obviously, I pulled the thing out of the camera shot, so I wasn't thinking all that clearly. But it's like, alright, we can do this. Square up. Just solve it. So we're back to Warplock Bronze, and eventually I'll get over to that spot that I had my little mishap. The thing is, I was right, I think, to want something lighter. I just picked the wrong thing. If you look at sort of the color scheme right now, it's very, you know, light reddish. The Warplock Bronze is reddish too, so we've got to solve for that. We're gonna have to add something. Maybe there'll be a patina that'll pop out at some point. But if we take a look here, this is where we're at right now at the end of part 1, and it does look pretty cool. I've got some work to do in terms of aging, griminess, that patina we talked about. But I feel pretty solid. I got to put the guns on, glue on the front plate. There's some work to do, but I'm psyched. This guy looks cool. Thanks for stopping by and hanging out for a bit. If you enjoyed part 1, make sure you hit subscribe so you can sort of get a notification when we get into part 2, which should be the exciting conclusion of this entire debacle. I hope you've had as much fun as I have. It's definitely a crazy project, but a lot of fun. Anyhow, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.